He didn't hold any national office. He was simply a minister at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Alabama. And yet, James McGregor, author of a book titled Leadership, and I quote, "Many acts heralded or bemoaned as instances of leadership, acts of oratory, manipulation, sheer self-advancement, brute coercion are not such. Much of what commonly passes as leadership, conspicuous position taken without followers or follow-through, posturing on various political stages, manipulation without general purpose, or territorialism is no more leadership than the behavior of small boys marching in front of a parade who continue to strut along Main Street after the procession are turned towards the fairground." End of quote. I found that very funny. Now, let's look at the state of affairs today and just try to see if there's a linkage between the present sorry state of our country, the entire country, and the quality of leadership. So in the light of the above submissions of leadership, can we identify a nexus between our country's core human development indices, dilapidated state of national and subnational infrastructure, insecurity, secessionist agitations, corruption, unemployment, illiteracy, and poor educational and health outcomes, low industrialization, increased immigration, and failure of leadership and incapacity on the part of those in authority? And I find some very important examples across Africa as well. The position of Rwanda after the genocide in 1994 comes to mind. The country has no obvious natural resources, no access to the sea, with a very small population, just about 12 million today. Hilly and inconvenient for agriculture or most other forms of large-scale economic activity. Yet, the emergence of President Paul Kagame has made all the difference. It's been a turning point, and by the clear vision, mobilization of the people, organization of the country, and effective actions consistent with the stated objectives, Rwanda now has one of the fastest growing economies in Africa and is now held up as an example of effective leadership, resulting in a marked improvement of circumstances of the whole nation. And while we laud the results that are self-evident, we should consider the budget of Rwanda in 2012, for instance. At that time, the budget of Rwanda for the entire year was $220 million, compared to the total budget of 5 southeastern states during the same period, which approximated to about $382 million. Now, look at the population of Rwanda, roughly 10.5 million as at that time, and then compare with the approximate population of the southeast of Nigeria. And yet, when you look at the outcomes from the national budget of Rwanda during that period, you cannot, in good conscience, say that the outcomes from the southeast provides any significant comparison. Now, earlier I spoke about the basic lamentations about the exclusion of evil in the management of relations affairs, and since Katumi encourages informed debate, I have taken liberty to obtain some information about Igbo representation at the federal level from 1999 to the present time to enable us to reason together. Let us take a look at Southeastern representation in the armed forces, the paramilitary forces, including the immigration and the intelligence services, the Senate, House of Representatives, since Nigeria's return to democracy. The armed forces. Between 2006 to 2008, Chief Marshal Paul Dike was Chief of Air Staff under President Obasanjo and briefly under President Yara. Between 2008 and 2010, Air Chief Marshal Paul Dike was the Chief of Defense Staff under Yara. And between 2010 and 2014, Lieutenant General Azubike Hetirika was Chief of Army Staff under President John. Under the paramilitary services, between the year 2000 and 2004, Lady UC Muiz was Controller General of Immigration under Obasanjo. And between 2005 to 2010, Mr. Shukura Joseph was Controller General of Immigration, also under President Obasanjo. From 2010 to 2013, Rose Chinyere Uzoma was Controller General of Immigration, now under Jonathan. For the police, Oboni Onuku was Inspector General of Police under Yerewa. And in 2009, Bernard Madiaba was Controller General of Customs, just a few months because of his retirement age. For the intelligence services, Ambassador Joe Keke was Director General of the Nigerian Intelligence Agency between 1999 to 2007. I go to the National Assembly. The Southeast has occupied the President of Senate position for 8 out of 19 years since the current republic, and has occupied the Deputy Senate President position for a total of 12 out of 19 years since the current republic, making the Southeast the longest serving of all the ethnic groups in either of these positions so far. For the benefit of the younger people, I know that history is no longer being taught in schools. It's been banned for decades now. But in 1999, or most parts of 1999, Evan Emerem was President of Senate. Between 1999 and 2000, Dr. Chuba Okadiwo was President of Senate. From 2000 to 2003, Chief Final Stanley was President. Then from 2000 to 2005, it was Adolfo Uzumabara. And then from 2005 to 2007, it was Chief Ken Nemani. And from 2007 to 20, for the Presidents of Senate. For the position of Deputy President of Senate, we had Chief Ike Wemadu from 2007 to 2019, 12 years. And currently, we have Chief Odius Okalu, 2019, just in the last couple of days, announced as the Chief Whip of the Senate. Let us look at the House of Representatives. Now, the Southeast has never occupied the position of the Federal House of Speaker, but it has occupied the Deputy Speaker position for 4 years, while it has occupied the Deputy Leader position exclusively since 1999. Exclusively since 1999. So, Deputy Speaker, 2011 to 2015, Emeki Hedioha. Deputy Leader of the Federal House. You had 1999 to 2003, you had Obogo Abuma Arue. 2003 to 2007, you had Gilbert Naji. Then 2015 to 2019, you had Chukwuma Onyema, but he was the Deputy Minority Leader. And then from 2019 to date, I'm not aware that anyone has been, there's anybody from South. But for Chief Whip of the Federal House, between 2007 and 2011, we had Emeki Hedioha, who was Chief Whip of the House of Representatives. And ladies and gentlemen, having heard what I've just said, I'm curious to know if and how your views may have changed with regard to the claim or perception of marginalization and exclusion from mainstream governance. This information, as you can see, relates to representation in the armed and paramilitary services and the legislature. With respect to the judiciary, it's important to point out that the Honorable Justice Rosemary Nkeje was Chief Judge of the Federal High Court. She was the first female and one of the longest serving in recent memory from 2001 to 2008. The Igbo have not had representation either as president or vice president since the advent of the current democracy. And I was yet to obtain data on executive appointments in parastatals and boards by presidents from 1999 to 2019 as at the time of this event, and therefore understand that the information provided may not paint the whole story. But in the light of what is available, can we continue to claim exclusion in mainstream governance, taking cognizance that leadership emerges in the National Assembly, for instance, through majority political parties, and where the political party has spread as the PDP had in the period 1999 to 2007, it is easier to achieve representation even with executive appointments. Let me, however, introduce a different dimension, which is really the main reason I actually sought this data. And it is the issue of the constitutional provision for the appointment of individual ministers from each state federation. It may be useful to examine the portfolios assigned to Southeast ministers within the past 20 years. So, with we've had the privilege of ministerial positions of transport, foreign affairs, foreign affairs, Ngozi Okonjo, the Minister of Finance, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Finance for about 7 years, obvious Executive in Education, Chukwuemeka Chikelu, Ambassador Thomas Aguiyi, Defense, Charles Ogu, Commerce and Industry. I'm going to spare you, but then we've had Igbo as Central Bank Governor. But thinking holistically, there are 3 perspectives to the set of information provided above. It is clear from the distribution of the appointments already in the military, especially in the military, that President Obasanjo, Yar'Adua, and Jonathan, and the PDP demonstrated statesmanship and greater sensitivity to Nigeria's diversity by ensuring representation of Nigeria's various groups in the nation's governance structure. This should always take consideration in order to give the nation's component groups a sense of inclusion and belonging. The other dimension is the quality of representation that we have had from representatives in these positions. And I invite you to take particular note that over an 8-year period from 1999 to 2007, Igbo had the position of Senate President exclusively, and this was the 3rd highest ranking position in the country. I urge you to let's keep emotions aside, and I'd like to ask, what legacies can we point to as the outcomes of these years of representation at those levels? Taking another look at the ministerial portfolios, by all standards, some of these were prestigious and pivotal. And I ask, how did we deploy these representative opportunities? And so we had the gun, we had the knife. How much? What quantity did we cut for ourselves? And so, like Chinua Achebe said in the very first lines of his book, The Trouble with Nigeria, wherein he said, the problem with Nigeria is purely and squarely a failure of leadership. He said, there's nothing basically wrong with Nigerian character, there's nothing wrong with the climate of air in Nigeria, it is simply the failure, the inability of his leadership to rise up to the challenge of leadership and take responsibility of and provide personal example. And being mindful of the intangibility, sensitivity, neglect and organization of its own representatives have been unable to meet this expectation. In any case, how have we fared each of the states of the Southwest, in which there is homogeneity of culture, language, norms, where our own people, our own governments have total control of its resources? How have we covered ourselves? What is the poverty situation here? What is the state of our infrastructure? What is the state of our roads, our schools, our hospitals? How much money goes on in these states? Before going to understand, let me speak without equivocation that the policy of exclusion of regions from strategic appointments for non-political candidates is impolitic, is undesirable, unhealthy, and unhealthy for national cohesion and unity. Now, as I reflected on my presentation, I recall what may be the leader of the People's Democratic Party, and the other person was Chikolu Falai. Both of them were Yorubas. Though President Obasanjo won the elections, but the PDP lost each and every state in the Southwest. The PDP lost each and every state in the Southwest. And those states, 6 of them, were won by the Alliance for Democracy. And that was the situation until 2007, when the PDP won all of Lagos in the elections. You may also recall that between 1999 and 2007, in fact in 2007, the Alliance for Democracy and the Action Congress, they had a running battle with the federal government of Nigeria. They had a major running battle. They were left excluded from the budget. They were excluded from the planning. In fact, the funds of local governments were seized. For one thing or the other, they were seized. They were withheld for several years. And though the region's mainstream political elite remained in opposition between 1999 to 2015 when the PDP was in power at the center, they got more than their fair share. A strategy which the PDP had hoped would help them to really garner support. But what is the lesson here? The lesson for me is the principled tenacity of the Yoruba political class, their steadfast opposition to the ruling PDP, and the equanimity with which they bore their plight. But most importantly, their historic comeback in 2015 through the instrument of a strategic alliance with Northern Nigeria, positioning the region as a preferred political partner to the exclusion of the Southeast from mainstream governance at the federal level since 2015. It is clear from the foregoing that the fringe position of the Yorubas from 1999 to 2015 was based on choice. On choice. And they took responsibility for these choices. During the same period, the Igbo also made their own choices, and the consistency of these choices appear to suggest to my mind that it may be anchored on some deeply held egalitarian political principles. But as we can see, while one group had taken full responsibility for their own choices in accordance with Newtonian principles, the other appeared to want to eat their cake and have it. My personal position is that the Igbo must take full responsibility for the political choices that were made. It is not in the culture of Igbo man to salivate because of their aroma emanating across the fence on food that is being cooked by the men. It's not in our culture. It's totally alien to our culture. So what are the lessons? The additional lessons that the Igbo political class can learn from the Yoruba experience are cohesion, unity, and clarity of vision, patience, dignity, tenacity, mobilization, accommodation, but most importantly, contentment. That when you have made your choice, you must be content with that choice, whilst you continue to prepare for a comeback. They were in the political trenches for 16 years or so to speak, but they persevered, coming together when they needed to and disagreeing when they had to for the ultimate and overall benefit of their region. I cannot fail to point out the influence of Yoruba patriarchal system on the politics of the region and how they are able to deploy the expertise of their intelligentsia, the influence of their sociocultural group made up of the elders who enjoy the recognition and consultative patronage of the political community.